Yeah. Well, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Francesco Marone Cinzano, who is one of the historic producers of Brunello di Montalcino, with a beautiful winery surrounded by 102 hectares of vines. And this also makes him one of the largest estates in Montalcino. Francesco has also been president to the Consorzio Brunello di Montalcino during the course of its history. So he has witnessed not only as a producer, but also as a council member, the gigantic steps that this wine has taken to become actually one of Italy's most important denominations. So welcome, Francesco. It's so nice to have you here with us, and especially because we're both in Tuscany and we both know each other, so it's a big pleasure. And I'm going to pass over to you, as I know you're going to have a presentation to share with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, greetings from Montalcino, from the southern slopes of Montalcino, from the Cordolce estate. I'm very pleased to talk about Brunello and sort of answer the question of how did Brunello become the most famous Italian wine around the world. There's been research conducted at the beginning of this year that has, as I just said, declared that Brunello is now the most famous Italian wine around the world. I have prepared a presentation, so I'll share my screen now and get going. There we go. Now, I've decided to start with this first image, a coat of arms of the municipality of Montalcino dating back to the 16th century. And I don't know if you're able to read on the bottom part of the coat of arms of the symbol, the smaller part, there is a representation of a tree, of an oak tree, and the words omni ex parte salubris, which I looked it up. The noun salubrious does exist in the English language, and effectively it says that in all the territory, in all the Montalcino territory, there is a healthy, salubrious kind of weather. I'd like to point this out because, as we will see in the presentation later on, this is an important element. The climate of Montalcino is an important element in the what I call the magic formula that has that makes the Brunello di Montalcino wine. I've also put on the right-hand side a series of words which I think are key to understanding how did Brunello reach the position it has now, representing Italian lifestyle, Italian wine and food around the world. And vision, pioneering, innovation, foresight, flair. This is all to say that it's not by accident that Brunello is where it is today, but because of the contribution of a number of people throughout history, throughout the last 150 to 100 years, and their contribution towards making it what it is today. I want to go through a bit of geography first of all. Probably all of you have been to Montalcino, but let's check the fact that typical hilltop village, Tuscany hilltop village, that rises off the valleys of the Orce River, of the Ombrone and the Asso River, the three rivers that encircle the territory of Montalcino. It raises effectively 400 meters from the bottom of the valleys, from the rivers running at the bottom of the valleys. So it is effectively like a huge pyramid, open on all sides, open to the winds, giving summer afternoons a very dry climate, very low humidity, air humidity that generates evaporation from the leaves of the plants and concentrates the fruits of the vineyards, of the grapes that are grown in the vineyards. This area was inhabited by the Etruscans. The Etruscans produced wine in the area of Montalcino. There are archaeological digs in the area of Castelnuovo dell'Abate, so on the southeastern side of Montalcino. To prove this, there are pools dug in stone where grapes were fermented, where wine was produced. And here on the picture, you have a cantaro. Cantaro is a typical cup that was used for special celebrations for drinking wine during special events in the Etruscan times. For the Romans, the Orcia Valley, the valleys around Montalcino were very important. You know the legionaries after their military service, 25 years serving in the army, in the Roman army, were given land where to settle, and the area around Montalcino, the area around the highest mountain in Tuscany, the Amiata mountain that overlooks Montalcino, was one of the favored areas for the former legionaries to settle. And wine was obviously produced in those days. Montalcino was an important center, a military fort that protected the road that the pilgrims used to take to go to Rome. In the after the fall of the Roman Empire, the pilgrims used to take the inland road to go to Rome, because on the coastal road, the Aurelia, which runs along the seaside, it was too dangerous to travel because of pirates and Turks that used to kidnap people and put them to in the galleys to row. So Montalcino was actually saw the passage of everybody that was headed for Rome, normal pilgrims, but also bishops and emperors and popes and so on. So very much on the main road of Italy. We know that the Emperor Charlemagne traveled through Montalcino, certainly on his way to Rome on the year 800 AD, when he was crowned Emperor of the Roman Empire on Christmas Eve of the year 800. He also laid the first stone of the Abbey of Sant'Antimo. If you have never visited the Abbey of Sant'Antimo, I recommend that you do so next time you come to Montalcino. It is certainly a unique feature of the territory, and here you have a picture of it. And tradition wants that Charlemagne himself laid the first stone of this abbey when he traveled through Montalcino. Montalcino belonged to the Republic of Siena at the end of the Middle Ages, in the days of the city-states in Italy, in the days of the good government, when the principle that were followed by politicians were according to the principle of a good head of family, a father that looked after his children and the next generation. So the good government of the Republic of Siena. And in fact, when in 1555 to 57, Montalcino was under siege by the Florentine troops, and then eventually was occupied by the Florentines. It was the last city-state of the Siena Republic, the last city-state to fall in Italy. And defense of Montalcino by the Senese troop was so courageous that Montalcino earned the title of city in that occasion and the honor of the arms when it surrendered. And here we have the first news about red wine. In fact, the captain of the troops that were defending Montalcino from siege, once they had run out of all food and all supplies, they had only some wine left, and he used to stain his face with the red wine in order not to look too pale to the Florentine troops that were giving siege to the city of Montalcino. And that's the first news of red wine from the area of Montalcino. Now let me spend briefly a few words about the wine that for which Montalcino was famous in those days. So we're talking about the late Middle Ages and Renaissance time. The Moscadello di Montalcino. Now, why do I want to mention this wine? It's because it's an indication of how unique the territory of Montalcino is compared to the rest of Tuscany and the surrounding area. If you think of it, when we talk about wines used for religious services, in the whole of Tuscany, we're talking about Vinsanto. We're talking about the wine made with Trebbiano grapes, mostly Trebbiano grapes, and a method of production where the wine undergoes a oxidized fermentation. So that the wine will not oxidize further later on in its conservation. Only in Montalcino, white muscat grape, Moscato Bianco, is used, and the style of the wine in the descriptions from the descriptions of the very early days is for a wine that preserves the freshness and fruitiness of primary aromas of the white Moscato grape. So still today, a small number of producers in Montalcino continue this tradition of Moscadello. And this is to say that already in the Middle Ages, Montalcino was exporting wine to the rest of Europe, especially to France and England. It's in the poem that I mentioned on this slide, Bacco in Toscana from 1685. It says that it's a wine that pleases the ladies of Paris and on the Thames. So it was shipped to France and the UK and London, certainly already in those days. Now, the story of Brunello, we can date the beginning of such story to the middle of the 19th century, around 1850. And here, the first person we should talk about is Clemente Santi, the ancestor of the Biondi Santi family. He was a pharmacist from the northern part of Tuscany, and he is the real pioneer of Brunello. He, in fact, discovered that the fact that wine produced with Sangiovese grapes, grown in the municipal boundaries of Montalcino, and aged in the large oak barrels that are part of the tradition of the cellars here in Montalcino. Well, such wine did not turn into vinegar. Actually, it improved with time, and you could actually keep it for a very long time, even up to 30 years, and it kept getting better, and it kept healthy and not turning into vinegar. He sent his wine to the fairs in London and Paris, especially in Paris in the year 1856. And there is news of this or the existence of his wines in those days. He was followed by his son, Ferruccio Biondisanti, whom around the 1860s, 1870s, set out the rules of the production that his father had discovered, 100% Sangiovese, and the fact of limiting to one grape the profile of the wine is quite a breakthrough, quite an innovation, not to be seen in other parts of Italy until very later on. He required the aging in the oak barrels, also a requirement which was unusual for those days, and insisted on the estate-produced concept and approaching the worldwide markets. So continuing on the tradition of shipping the wines to different markets around the world. Now we're talking about very, very small productions, limited to a small number of connoisseurs, but certainly already a presence which has been continuous since then, since the middle of the 19th century onwards. So effectively, Clemente Santi and his son Ferruccio discovered and codified the magic formula, which is still valid today for Brunello di Montalcino. And the magic formula is composed of the following elements: the climate, as I was mentioning at the beginning, this salubrious climate, this healthy climate, which sees very dry summer afternoons, very little rainfall. One of the areas of Tuscany where you have the smallest amount of rainfall of all the region, and very clear-cut seasons, as you can see on the picture on the screen. So this climate, which affects and is part of the evolution, adaptation of the Sangiovese grape in this territory. Sangiovese is, as you know, the most planted red grape in central Italy, but only in Montalcino. It is the requirement to use it by itself, to use it pure, as opposed to the adjoining regions where it's usually and traditionally blended with other grapes. So Sangiovese, nothing but Sangiovese, and allow me to say that there are clones of Sangiovese which have been selected over time, and certainly the Biondisanti family has selected a clone of Sangiovese, which from the Il Greppo estate, but it is just Sangiovese that has adapted to the local conditions. So Sangiovese Grosso, Brunello, they're all, it has been confirmed by DNA testing. It is just Sangiovese that has acquired special characteristics because of the conditions in which it is grown here in the Montalcino territory. And then the third element of the magic formula is the soils of Montalcino. Soils from different geological eras, from some soils from in the lower part of the territory, from the last glaciation, from the river basins of the rivers that surround the mountain of Montalcino, the Halo Montalcino. All of them, sorry, some very young, other very old geologically, so dating back to when this part of the world was under seawater, so former seabed. But in any event, all of them with a very important content of limestone, all alkaline soils, all soils that have pHs well above 6.5 and 7. So readily absorbable calcium that affects the quality of the tannins. Now we come to the early part of the 20th century, before the Second World War, when Tancredi Biondisanti took another step, which was quite a breakthrough for those days, the creation of a cooperative where the production from the various farmers in the territory of Montalcino was brought to be turned into wine for the fermentations, for the aging, for the bottling, and for the commercial effort. This cooperative lasted until the Second World War, and as I just said, it was quite an innovation for those days to have this kind of cooperation, this kind of structure for servicing the production of various farmers on the territory. We come to the year 1933, when the government of Italy decides to establish in Siena the Enoteca Italiana. Some of you might have visited Enoteca Italiana. It doesn't exist anymore. It existed until about 10 years ago in the fortress of Siena. And in the year 1933, the first showing of the Italian wine collection took place in Siena, as it says here on the picture, the vini tipici d'Italia, so typical Italian wines from different regions were shown. And insofar as Brunello is concerned, you have the list here of the producers that participated. So Argiano, Barbi from the Colombini family, Castelgiocondo, Fattoria Sant'Angelo, which no longer exists, but it was around the 1950s split among the two brothers, the two owners, and it became Cordoccio on one hand and Poggione on the other. Poggio alle Mura, which eventually was purchased by Banfi, and Montosoli, the last exhibitor that participated in 1933. Now it's to be noticed that in the case of Fattoria Sant'Angelo, for instance, the wines that were shown in 1933 were all Brunellos from 3 different vintages. So a confirmation of the fact that unlike wines from other parts of Italy, from other regions, the wine in Montalcino used to age well and was kept for various years in the old barrels already in those days. Then we come to the first years after before the Second World War and just after the Second World War, where the leading person in Montalcino in those days was Giovanni Colombini, the forefather of the Cinelli Colombini family of these days. He was born in 1906. He was a farmer, a very modern thinking farmer, and pioneered modern viticulture in Montalcino. He also opened the first Italian public wine shop in the fortress of Montalcino. So another element of innovation, quite unusual for those days, and a lot of foresight there as well. Another striking element, the first mail order selling of Tuscan wines, like a predecessor of e-commerce. just think about in the 1930s or before the Second World War, shaping wines and having a mail order for wines. And also the giving a high value, high price per bottle to the wines. So promoting a premium wine concept already in those days. In 1966, so quite early on, the DOC, Denominazione Origine Controllata, was awarded to the Brunello di Montalcino, and the rules of the disciplinare of the protocol of production required 4 years in the oak barrels and a total minimum aging of 5 years. Also, the 4 years in oak barrels was a minimum requirement. In fact, when my father arrived here in Montalcino in the year 1973, he found wines 5 years old in the barrels. It was customary in those days to bottle the wine when you received an order. You didn't bottle the wine in advance, waiting for the markets to call for it. You kept it in the oak barrels and bottled it when you got an order, when you had the certainty of the invoice. You would purchase the bottles and prepare the wine for shipment. So it was quite common for the wine to stay even beyond the minimum requirement of 4 years in the oak barrels. A year later, on April 28, 1967, the Consorzio of Brunello di Montalcino was created. So 25 producers adhered to the Consorzio, and the first president was Leopoldo Franceschi from the Sant'Angelo estate. In 1980, Brunello di Montalcino was the first wine in Italy to be awarded the classification of DOCG, so controlled and guaranteed, and the introduction of the seal, which you can see on the picture on the neck of the bottle, as a visual guarantee of the quality of the wine. In 1983, the Rosso di Montalcino denomination came along, and also a novelty here, the first time that in Italy a DOC was awarded on vineyards that were already subject to a prior denomination. So Rosso di Montalcino, and before 1983, was known as red wine from the Brunello vineyards. And as I just said, in 1983, this was made official that from the same vineyard you could produce two different denominations. Other territories, other areas in Italy then followed suit and adopted the same principle, such as Nebbiolo from the Barolo vineyards and so on. So here again, an innovation from the territory of Montalcino. Another quite very important innovation from a commercial point of view was the registration of Brunello di Montalcino as a trademark. This meant that over the years, whenever someone in Australia or California or some other part of the world tried to produce Brunello, to use the Brunello name for its wine, you didn't enter into political negotiations between governments like they had to do with champagne or cognac or other European denominations. We just in Montalcino called our lawyers in New York or wherever the breach of the trademark was taking place and stopped it from happening. So quite some foresight of understanding that to protect the denomination a commercial instrument such as the trademark was useful and necessary. And then we come to Franco Biondisanti, who had this marvelous intuition of turning the capacity to age of Brunello Montalcino into a media event, the recorking of all vintages of Brunello Montalcino, calling from customers, restaurants around the world, bring me your bottles of Brunello and I'll recork them for you, and doing so in front of a notary public and calling Italian journalists to witness the event. That made a big difference in the reputation of Brunello Montalcino. So I was lucky enough, I had the honor of meeting and sharing old vintages with Franco Biondisanti. He certainly had a great vision. Another person who's probably not very well known, I don't know if any of you have met him, but that made a huge difference in Montalcino was Giulio Gambelli. Giulio Gambelli was an enologist, a winemaker, that was employed by the consortium of Brunello di Montalcino to go around all the producers in Montalcino and give advice as to the quality of the wine, the practices in the cellar, the management of the oak barrels, the blending, all the aspects of the production. He had a nickname, Bicchierino, so small glass, because he didn't drink much. He always said that he would take a Bicchierino, nothing more than that one. But he had an extraordinary capacity to recognize the wines. I remember once we went during the harvest, during the fermentations, we went around the cellar here at Coldorcia, and he was tasting and making a comment with each barrel or each tank we were tasting of the fermenting wines. And so he commented on the first one, on the second one, third one. Then we came to the fourth tank. He put his nose in the glass and he looked at me and said, "This is not your grapes." And in fact, it was the grapes. A tank was wine made from grapes from a neighbor who had asked her to vinify for him, and he immediately recognized it was a neighbor from very, very close to us geographically, but he immediately recognized that there was a different hand in the grapes. So Giulio Gambelli, he also collaborated for many, many years with Franco Biondisanti. So he was key to the production of the Biondisanti Brunello as well. Another element which is quite unusual, and not many wine areas around the world or around Italy or Europe can say so, is the incredible contribution that the elected mayors of the municipality of Montalcino made. So in the 20 years between 1960 and 1980, Ilio Raffaelli, who was a farmer himself and advocated quality for agriculture together with Colombini, that I mentioned before. Mario Bindi, who understood in a moment when Montalcino was quite depressed economically, and where the agriculture of the territory had lost a little bit direction. He understood that Brunello di Montalcino offered an opportunity and made sure that everybody focused on Brunello. And then Massimo Ferretti, who also defended the uniqueness of Sangiovese only from the municipality of Montalcino, all the way up to the current mayor of Montalcino, who 2 weeks ago was elected senator. So he's unfortunately now in Rome, and I hope he doesn't forget his work in Montalcino. He obtained a very important breakthrough for us in recent years. The Italian legislation includes the concept of rural districts, usually rural districts which are able to obtain contributions from the European Union and from the central government in Rome, are made up of a number of municipalities. He obtained a rural district just for Montalcino, just for our municipality, in which we have the intention of developing not only the wine sector, but everything that revolves around it and all the other productions typical of the municipality. In terms of producers, I think it's important to mention the investment made by outside investors in a time in history when Montalcino was very depressed and in fact rated as one of the poorest municipalities in Italy. The first one to make a sizable investment in Montalcino in those days was Emilio Nardi, starting from 1958 on the northern side of Montalcino. My father in 1973, I remember with my brother and sister, we didn't want to come to Montalcino. The roads were so bad. It was, nobody knew where Montalcino was. It was so difficult to reach. But my father felt it had potential, and he was right. Gianfranco Soldera, who arrived in 1975, an insurance agent from Milan, who had, in fact, little knowledge about wine and vineyards. He came, established himself here, and mind you, to this day, Gianfranco Soldera is the producer that managed to obtain the highest price for a bottle of Brunello di Montalcino, a current vintage of Brunello di Montalcino, of all the producers. And on top of that, many other contributions that he made. Would like to remember the price for young enologists that he used to give every year. And then in 1978, Banfi started the investment in purchasing land, and all the way to 1984 when they inaugurated the cellar here in Montalcino. Now, some information about the denominations, the appellations here on the territory. Montalcino sees a very unusual, very high number of appellations on its own territory, which is, I repeat once more, just one municipality. Of course, Brunello di Montalcino, DOCG, Rosso di Montalcino, DOC, Moscadello di Montalcino, we talked about historic wine of the area, Sant'Antimo, denomination created in the late 90s to allow producers from Montalcino to enter the super Tuscan market effectively. So to use grapes other than Sangiovese and have a DOC status. Now, what's missing here is Chianti dei Colli Senesi, DOCG. So another DOCG on the territory, and then of course Toscana IGT is part of the picture as well. So all in one municipality, quite an unusual number of appellations. Now here you have another piece of news which I consider very important. 24,000 hectares is the total surface of the municipality of Montalcino, and that is under the denomination, the appellation DOCG. Only 15% of such territory is actually planted with vineyards. Of the 24,000 hectares, half of it still today is actually covered by natural woodland, by Mediterranean shrubs. This is unique to the wine world, certainly as far as Italy is concerned, but also the rest of Europe. And you have the breakdown of the different the appellations here, the detail. And now the number of producers, 208 bottlers, another 50 grape growers. So a total number of grape growers, 258. And out of the 258, 13 still today produce Moscadello di Montalcino. And bottles per year, effectively, this is old data, but it's still valid because we are not allowed to increase the surface of Brunello di Montalcino or Rosso di Montalcino. 9 million bottles on average per year of Brunello and 4.5 of Rosso di Montalcino. The future. I think that these are my personal views. We should concentrate, invest in our territory. This is the picture you can see here gives you the feeling for the different soils. The lighter colors indicate younger soils, younger from a geological point of view. The darker colors are older soils from more ancient geological eras. So a lot of difference, a lot of different situations, different microclimates, Mediterranean climate on the southern part of Montalcino, so the bottom part of the picture, more continental climate on the northern side, lots of valleys, lots of different elevations over sea level, from 100 meters over sea level to more than 600 meters over sea level. So up to almost 2 months difference between the two extremes in terms of sprouting in spring and harvesting. A month and a half difference for sure, as that separates the different situation, the different elevations, the different soils, the different climates. So to ensure the best value of these territories, I advocate putting up as many signs as the one you can see on the picture as possible. These brown signs indicate toponymy. Toponymy, the Italian word that's used to indicate an area which is typical. It's recognized as unique, with a unique microclimate, unique conditions since ancient times. So when you drive around Montalcino, around Tuscany, when you see these brown signs, you know you're looking at the indication of a special place, a place that's characterized by unique conditions. And the biodiversity, the fact that, as I said, half of the territory of Montalcino is still woodland. This means the presence of wildlife, the presence of biodiversity, the sustainability of the territory of Montalcino is a very important feature we should develop further. We should always keep in mind and use as a platform to promote our territory. And this is my closing message.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Great to hear the sort of history and how the people that have been involved have made Montalcino what it is today. And I just wanted to know if there's any questions from anybody from the floor. I don't think there's anything in the chat, so if anything's been sparked, if you can just put your hand up and let us know if there's any questions that you have for Francesco. Michelle, is there anything you wish to say?
Yeah, no, I find it absolutely fascinating. I mean, also living here and knowing Montalcino, but there's so much richness to the territory that that of course escapes, attention unless you go into detail. I was wondering if there's ever going to be an expansion to the I mean, I know you were talking about new territories. If there is going to be an expansion to the DOCG, I know sometimes it's a bit of a controversial issue because one wants to keep the true terroir to the main production. But can you expand a little bit on what you see for the future? Or if they're going to be new investors coming in, what's your sort of feel on that?
Well, new investors are arriving all the time. There is always a debate among producers that are already present on the territory. Is it a pity that foreigners are coming to buy estates here? I feel it is not a pity. I feel it is part of the history of Montalcino, starting from Clemente Santi, who was not from Montalcino, and he started this whole story of Brunello, and the contribution by other foreigners that have arrived, among others my family, my father, and the new investors bring investment, bring new views, more modern approach. So yeah. I feel it is important that we continue to have to welcome outside investors with open arms, and expanding the vineyards of Brunello and of Rosso Montalcino. A very difficult decision. The last time that happened was in the year 2003, 2004. Effectively, the wines came on the market 4 years later, 4 or 5 years later, so 2008, 2009. That coincided with the economic crisis. And the net effect of the increase in production and the slowing down in demand by international markets meant the arrival of bottlers, meant the arrival of people from outside that simply purchase from small producers that have difficulty in marketing their own wines. They purchase bulk wine, they have it bottled by someone in the territory of Montalcino, slap on a label on it, and end up making a small margin. They don't invest in vineyard, they don't invest in cellars. So last time we expanded the production, even though it was a small expansion, it made created quite a difficult situation. Now you find bottles of Brunello at low prices in the petrol stations and the motorways in Italy, and so I hope we don't expand production unless we really reach a situation in which all of the bottles we produce are sold.
Thank you very much. I think there are other questions. So
there's one
in the chat.
Rennie would like to have Rennie's put his hand up, like to have a conversation, like to make a point. Rennie, go ahead. Sorry, Michelle.
Yes. Hello, Francesco. I would like to hear your personal opinion on the subject of Sottozzone. Now that I know the debate has been going on in the consortio for many years, and now Chianti Classico have made the UGAs. So what is the situation for the moment in Montalcino?
Lack of mobility, total lack of on one hand, the disciplinare, the rules of production, the founding fathers have left us with the inheritance of the toponimo, of the possibility of bottling and strict rules, and the denomination vigna. So single vineyards that relate to territories recognized since the old days, so that have a right to the brown sign I was showing before. I think we should follow that that rule we were given by by the forefathers. It's the best way of giving value to our territory, recognizing the differences of the different parts of Montalcino, and as I like to say to my colleagues, my fellow producers, make so that our differences unite us.
Can I go, Andrea?
Okay, Angela,
Okay, must find where to unmute.
you are unmuted. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Francesco, is it true that your clone of Sangiovese is unique to Brunello, and different from that in Chianti Classico and Montepulciano? And how do you develop your own clone, your own vines from this clone?
Yes. Well, there are two main clonal selection works that have taken place in Montalcino with the collaboration of the University of Florence. One was conducted by Banfi and the other one was conducted by Coldorcia. What happens there from a technical point of view is that you can only get approved as clones that are officially registered individuals that are completely clean from a sanitary point of view, do not present any viruses. And so Coldorcia has registered two, which are available to everybody. And Banfi certainly registered some. I don't know the exact number, but now, at the same time, clonal selection works have been conducted in Chianti, notably the most important one, the Chianti 2000 project, which has selected also a number of clones. The experience we have put together in Coldorcia is that the best quality comes from vineyards planted with a collection of different clones that give a greater range of aromas and flavors. So we actually at Coldorcia use a family of clones, not just one or two specifically. And we use clones from Chianti as well with good success. Now the work is not finished, all to the contrary. Especially with climatic changes, the parameters of selection of the clones have changed completely. When we started in the late 80s and the early 90s, we started the clonal selection work. We were looking for clones that would ripen earlier, so as to not have to wait until end of October, beginning of November to pick the grapes. And now we are looking for clones that will completely the opposite, that will ripen later, so that we don't need to bring them home at the end of August or the very beginning of September. So it's an ongoing work, and we have a very interesting field vineyard at Coldorcia, planted 5 years ago with Toscovit. Toscovit is the association of nurseries, of vine nursery, Tuscany vine nurseries, and we planted the 19 ultimate clones of Sangiovese from Chianti selections, from Montalcino selections, and so on. And we are comparing them to see which ones are behaving best with the climatic change, with the droughts, with the heat waves, and so on.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Okay, there's one more question there from Becky Sue was asking, could you talk a little bit more about Moscadello?
Yes, well, I find Moscadello fascinating. As I explained earlier, it's an island. Montalcino is an island in Tuscany, because since the Middle Ages, Moscato Bianco is used here as opposed to other more traditional grapes such as Trebbiano. And the style of wine is different. The style of Vinsanto is, as I explained earlier, an oxidization wine, almost a solera method of certainly leaving air inside the barrels during fermentation and allowing the fermentation to go on all through the winter. Moscadello, to the contrary, it's protection of the freshness of aromas, of the primary aromas of Moscato, which and the descriptions of Moscadello wine from Montalcino from the very early days, from the 17th century, confirm this this style of wine, this different style. It's one thing I would really like to do, and I need some of you here in Montalcino, is to call on all the producers of Moscadello, all the 10 or 12 producers of Moscadello in Montalcino, and have a tasting, a horizontal tasting of all the Moscadellos, and making a bit of piece of news about it. It's so difficult to sell sweet wines these days that we need a bit of a hand on that.
Excellent. Well, I think we've really come to the end of our presentation, and Francesco, thank you so much for taking us through all those passages of history and of how Montalcino has really risen to become such an important wine. And I'm sure it'll stay up there and remain at the top of Italy's top wine list. So yeah, thank you again for spending time with us, and I'll pass back to Andrea now.